Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm here to speak on Parshat Metzora and also to see how Parshat Metzora actually connects to Pesach, the same theme of Lashon Hara. So in Metzora, we learn about Motzi Shemra, someone who speaks in a defaming manner to others, and we understand it's not a physical illness that occurs, but a spiritual illness, because he has to go for an encounter with the Kohen Gadol rather than a medical doctor. And also the Gemara says one of the proofs that it wasn't a physical illness but a spiritual one, during the 3 pilgrimage festivals, the Jews marched to Yerushalayim, and it says that the leper as well remained as part of the group. If the leper was actually physically ill and had a communicative disease, he would have been separated from the group. So we see that the leper is punished and is transformed by being placed outside of the camp, because Lashon Hara separates a person from the group. He is demeaned and singled out, so he gets to see what that feels like and hopefully gets rehabilitated in that way. Also, we have 2 other aspects there. There's leprosy that begins in the house, and then in the begadim, in the clothing, and then on the body itself. Perhaps the sequence is that way because there's a hope for redemption by the place that you live in, the environment that you live in that is impacting you in a negative way. If you remove yourself from that house, you can become rehabilitated. If that's not sufficient, there's leprosy on the clothing, because the nature of clothing is you cover yourself up, and there too, that may work by taking your clothing off and really facing the negativity. But if not, if you cover it up and don't have the ability to look at the darkness, look at what you're projecting through the symptom of Lashon Hara, then that's not sufficient. So it attacks you on the body itself, and through that suffering, this transformation and rehabilitation and teshuvah. One of the things that has to be done is to bring a sacrifice of 2 birds. The 2 birds symbolize 2 types of sin that are related to sins of the mouth. One is Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is even spreading truth about people. Rechilut, saying false things about people. And Motzi Shemra, really defaming a person. So we see that in those instances, you bring 2 birds. One bird is sacrificed and cannot be eaten. That's the bird that speaks Lashon Hara, symbolizes speaking Lashon Hara, so it has to be cut off completely. But the other bird, the punishment there is the fact that you could have said good things and you didn't use your mouth in a powerful way to praise people or to speak words of faith. So that bird is let go to go out and say, spread the word, spread the good word, and that bird is not to be eaten. So these are some of the elements of the transformation and the rehabilitation from Lashon Hara. Now, the holiday of Pesach too has that encounter with Lashon Hara, because firstly, the rabbis say that each of the pilgrimage festivals have 3 aspects to them: the agricultural aspect, the historical aspect, but each one also has a spiritual dimension. So, for example, Shavuot is the expansion of the mind, the encounter with Torah, and the development of the mind. Sukkot is the development of actions. There's so many mitzvot, ma'asiyot, that relate to Sukkot. So you're developing your ability to be disciplined and do all those actions. And Pesach is actually the tikkun for the mouth, for speaking lashon hara, because if we take a look at the history of how the Jews got to Egypt to begin with, it was a result of the sin of lashon hara. Yosef speaking, gossiping about his brothers, and the brothers being jealous and saying bad things about Yosef, and as a result of this lashon hara, the Jews, Yosef was sold to Egypt, and the Jews developed in Egypt and then became enslaved in Egypt. The word so the tikkun is to use the mouth in a way to overcome that. So we know the overall theme in Pesach is moving from slavery to freedom. But when you're enslaved, you really can't even use your mouth in a direct way. You're so repressed and defensive, you're almost mute. So freedom comes about when you're able to really express yourself with words of Torah, with words of encouragement. A human being, the essence of a human being, the development of a human being has to do with speech, with self-expression. It says in Bereshit, it says, "Vayipach bi'abav nishmat chayim," that God breathed into the human being the spirit of life through the nostrils. And the Targum Onkelos says, through the nostrils is ruach demalala, the power of speech, the power of expression. We need to express our unique self to others, and people need to listen and allow us to unfold in that way. So Pesach, the tikkun is the tikkun of speech. Pesach, the mouth speaks. Sach, the Aramaic for sicha, the mouth speaks. And Pharaoh represents Perah, the evil tongue, the gossiping, the maligning of the Jewish people. So what we do during Pesach is we realize that lashon hara is basically a symptom of the inner enslavement, of the inner discord, the sense of lack of self-esteem or anger, anxiety, envy, all the ego-boundedness that creates a displacement through words. So we have to get to the essential inward slavery and move from Mitzrayim, from the place of tightness, to Yisrael, to the place of freedom. Yisrael, those who struggle with God; Yisrael, those shir el, Rav Kook says, those who sing to God; or Yisrael yashar el, those who work for righteousness, and following the mitzvot and getting close to God and loving human beings and elevating the world. That's how freedom occurs. But when we become soul conscious, we move from the realm of chametz to the realm of matzah. Chametz is the ego, the aggrandizement, the bloodedness, the rising of the bread. And the matzah is a state of the low person's bread, the humility, the soulfulness. When we operate from that place, we're free, we're connected to God, with the true source of life and connection and the people and the community and nature, as opposed to ego-boundedness, where we're just worried about ourselves and we're enslaved to all our ego needs. So we try, through using the mouth, to move to a state of freedom. It says, all who speak through the whole night and really encounter as much as they can the inner tight places, the fears that they have, and face those fears. And sometimes it takes the whole night. So those who do it more assiduously, all the way through the morning, those are the ones that are to be praised. So how do we do this? We the Haggadah is set up with the word Haggadah itself means to tell the tale. We start from our origins, from the history that confronts us and the dark places, the history of Aramei Avi. We come from a place of enslavement in some way, but a place of limitation. And so that creates a humility. It creates a sense of suffering that can lead to liberation, but it's a place of working toward greater wholeness. And when we realize that we've come from that place, it gives us a sense of humility, which is important in the struggle. You know that the Jewish people suffer from the sense of an inflation and a deflation. We're an Am Segula, a treasured people. So our chosenness sometimes gives a sense of inflation, or better than, but also since we always have to live up to the mitzvot and all the tasks that we're responsible to, that also gives us a sense of guilt, of deflation. We never quite reach that sense of perfection. So we have a lot that we carry, and the nations of the world also contribute to that. The sense of separation that we have creates a sense of jealousy, etc., and projection of a lot of hostility on us, and also our sense of not having our own land through the galut gives us a sense of we're less than as a nation. So we suffer from that. We'll speak about that a little bit later on when we speak about anti-Semitism. We'll get to that in a moment. But so the Seder starts off with communication, and we have the four children, 4 sons, 4 archetypes that we have to engage with. Freedom can only come about if we're open to others and to other energies that help us grow. That's the difference between matzah and chametz as well. If you look at the letters, they're the same. Matzah has a mem, and chametz has a mem. Matzah has a tzaddik, and chametz has a tzaddik. The only letters that are different is the hey in matzah and the chet in chametz. And if you look at the the shape of the hey and the chet, they're very similar. The only difference is the hey, matzah, the hey is open on the side. The chametz, the chet, is closed. So freedom comes about when we're open. We're open to other energies, the difference, and we imbibe from them, and we grow and we learn, and we're able to face some things that we're not aware of through the dialogue, etc., and we transcend them. Whereas chametz is closed, and that creates a sense of entropy. We die. We're just stuck in one place, and we refuse to grow, and that's against the nature of life. So we confront the 4 sons. We're open to the Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, and the Sheinu Yedei L'Shol. The Chacham, of course, we can learn from the wise person. We engage with ideas with the wise person. We don't attempt to engage in a dialogue proving ourselves right or the other proving himself or herself right. That doesn't lead to actual truth, but a true dialogue to be open and to respect wisdom and grow from that. The Rasha we could also learn from, and that is that the Rasha, the evil that's projected from the Rasha, is probably also related to a wound within his or her soul. And the way to heal that is to engage and to truly listen and to develop some empathy for the pain that the person is really suffering. And you could also express your own pain and create a sense of empathy and intimacy even with the Rasha. The Rasha tends to not be open to his or her pain and projects that onto others. And but that's just a symptom. It's a reactivity. But we believe that even within the Rasha, there's a Tzelem Elokim, there's an image of God that we can connect to and learn from. And we grow through that process because we see that we don't have to be reactive ourselves, but we notice our reactivity and we try to temper that and grow from that. Then the Tam, the one who's simple, we sometimes also often don't engage with. We think we're better than when we're intellectual or sophisticated, but the Tam could teach us about a simple faith, a simplicity, an acceptance of life, and that we can buy from. The Sheinu Yedei L'Shol, the one who doesn't even know how to ask the questions, also we might be judgmental toward and even call them sinners, that they're not learned and they're not, therefore don't do the mitzvot. But on the contrary, Rav Moshe Feinstein said that in our generation, all those who are Sheinu Yedei L'Shol are actually Tinok Shenishba. They're actually like children that were imprisoned. They never got an opportunity to learn, so they're just not educated. So our job should be to educate, to relate, to share the beauty of Judaism, and help them ask the questions. And that's so essential. I remember when I was in Israel many years ago on a Friday night in Yerushalayim, there was a Chen theater that was open on Shabbos, and people on the line were accosted by some very zealous Jews who yelled at them, Shabbos, Shabbos. But there was a person who was wise who was standing by and said, maybe you want to come to have a Shabbos meal with me, to engage, to educate. And that's the way to create beauty in the world and create a Kiddush Hashem in the world. So the Sheinu Yedei L'Shol can bring forth great potential of growth within ourselves. I remember also the great story of I learned in yeshiva in Rav Kook's yeshiva for 2 years ago, and the story was told about Rabbi Aryeh Levine, who was a great friend of Rav Abraham Yisrael Cohen Cook. He was the rabbi of the lepers in the prisons, and the story was told that he had a shul, and during mincha time he would walk to a shul, and one day he didn't have a minyan there, and he noticed on the corner there was a teenager, a tall boy, who actually Rabbi Aryeh Levine noticed before as well. Rabbi Aryeh Levine was a very short man, but this day, when he didn't have the minyan, he went over to the teenager and asked him, please, maybe you could help us make a minyan. So the teenager laughed at him and he said, are you kidding, Rabbi? Don't you see I don't even wear a kippah? And I'm not interested in davening and praying. So Rabbi Aryeh Levine said, I'm a short man. I can't see what's on your head, but I see you have a great, wonderful heart. And that was touching to the young man. And that story ends that of course, he became from after a while. So getting back to the point of the dialogue, we have to continue to work to expand, to move from the state of imprisonment and slavery to freedom. You know, a slave can't, or someone who's traumatized can't even speak. He or she has no desire to or ability to. He's so shut down. A free person speaks. A free person can directly speak honestly and words of love. So we have to allow a person to speak and listen to people. It's good at a Seder to bring in people not only who are like you, but people who are different from you. And Lashon Hara that has many aspects to it. We see it not only within the self, but in our outer culture with politicians and governments through propaganda and people speaking lies. In our American society, we also have it even in the advertising industry, just falsehood, trying to sell a product through tricking a person, through associating. I say they want to get in to buy a car, they'll put a handsome man or a beautiful woman next to the car to give the association that if you buy the car, you'll have the woman, you'll have the man. It's sheker. It's not the way of truth, the way that the Torah suggests. So all our darkness is an opportunity to grow. This is not a world of true emet. This is a world of emunah. We have to get to greater truth, to journey towards truth through our faith, through our marching ahead. And Lashon Hara is not only a cultural thing, but there's a Lashon Hara that we do toward ourselves. You know, there's a wonderful story told about the Chavetz Chayim. The Chavetz Chayim one day was going back home to Radin, to his yeshiva in Radin. He was on a train, and a gvir, a very wealthy person, was sitting next to him, and they engaged in conversation. And the Chavetz Chayim asked him where he's going, and the wealthy person said, I'm going to see the Chavetz Chayim, the great Chavetz Chayim. And the Chavetz Chayim said, he's not so great. And the wealthy person then slapped him across the face. And the Chavetz Chayim, a humble person, he didn't say much, but shortly afterwards, hundreds of people surrounded the train as they came to the train station. They were the students of the Chavetz Chayim, and the wealthy man realized who he was and what he did, and he was so contrite, he was so guilt-ridden that the whole night he wandered around the town, and finally in the morning, he knocked on the door of the Chavetz Chayim, and he said, And Chavetz Chaim warmly welcomed him in, and he said, "Rabbi, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were, and I hit you, and please, can you ever forgive me?" So the Chavetz Chaim says, "Certainly, I can forgive you, and I want to tell you something, that you taught me something yesterday that was very important. My whole life, I've been preaching in Lashon Hara, is speaking, spreading gossip or speaking ill of others. Yesterday, you taught me that Lashon Hara also applies not to say something bad about yourself. You said the great Chavetz Chaim, and I said he's not so great. That also is not good. We're all created in the image of God. We have to have humility, but we have to also have an appreciation of our Tzelem Elokim and love for ourselves as well. So, and then there's also a story about I want to share with you about Reb Nachman, a saying of Reb Nachman of Bratzel that's also very illustrative of this point. Reb Nachman says, "V'ahavta l'recha kamocha." He says, if you look at the word Rea, there's a resh and an ayin in there. So he says, you have to love the evil within yourself, the dark places as well, and you have to integrate that within the self, to find a true holistic sense of freedom. If we don't engage with the Ra within ourselves, then we tend to be, because we're so ashamed of it, we tend to repress it and displace it on others. In psychology, they call that splitting. I'm good and you're bad. So there's never any hope for any peace, any rapprochement between people with a psyche who don't really integrate the wholeness of the self and have a sense of love for the self. And it's through the encounter with the Ra within the self that is very growth-inducing. It takes strength to face it, and a struggle to really overcome the fears and move ahead with it. But when we get to that place, we become transformed, and we have a true love of ourselves in the proper way. So in the Haggadah, we continue telling the tale and moving from slavery to a sense of redemption and freedom. There's the time of redemption, of freedom. And we move through some interesting passages that actually illustrate how we get to freedom. One of them I read many years ago in the Haggadah of Philip Kahn. He has a beautiful commentary, and he explained one of the Psalms in the Haggadah ends with Eim Habanim Smecha, hallelujah. The mother of the children rejoice, hallelujah. And he says, why was that particular psalm included? He said, it's the secret of the word aim, mother. He said, all the great redemptions in Jewish history have to do with introducing the feminine, integrating the feminine into reality, sense of compassion. Because ultimately the initial split, whether it's a Kabbalistic split, the splitting of the vessels and the shards, which created the hiding of the light within, and our job is to redeem the light, redeem the feminine, the Shekhinah, or whether it's the Galut, the exile of the Jews from Israel, and the Shekhinah, the feminine dimension of God, goes into the Galut. Or the Kabbalists say every mitzvah that we do is for the sense of reintegrating the feminine and the masculine, creating that unity. We say l'shem yichud, kutsha b'richu, shchinte. May the masculine dimension of God and the feminine dimension of God be united in the upper worlds. So below, when we do a mitzvah with kavana and have that consciousness of uniting the feminine and masculine, the upper world is united, and then the light comes down toward us. So Rabbi Khan says that if you look at all the major redemptions in Jewish history, it was a result of aim. He says the first redemption from Egypt was from Aaron and Moshe, or Aaron and Miriam. Aaron is Aleph, and Moshe or Miriam is Mem. Aleph, Mem, Aim. The story of Purim also has Esther and Mordechai. Aleph, Esther, Mem, Mordechai, Aim. And the redemption in the future will be Eliyahu and Mashiach, Elijah and Mashiach, Aleph and Mem. So Aim. the introduction of the feminine into the world, the compassion to others that will redeem us and bring us closer to the Tzelem Elokim of others. So as we continue in the Haggadah, we continue to listen and to talk and to dialogue and to search within the inner freedom. Of course, the other aspect of it is to create freedom in the world as well, the social action piece. We know what it's like to be slaves, and therefore we have empathy to others who are downtrodden or who are alienated and need redemption. So we try to work. There's so many, every year there's a new Haggadah, women's Haggadah, civil rights Haggadah, and for people who have been estranged in some way. But so we continue with that, and then we have Birchat Hamazon, and then we have something that's strange called Shvach Chamascha, pour your wrath out, Hashem, on the Goyim who oppressed us. Amar Aleinu L'Chalotenu, they stood up and tried to destroy us. V'chol dor v'dor, Amar Aleinu L'Chalotenu, and we say that Esav Sonei et Yaakov, that throughout history we have this arch evil, and therefore we have to overcome it. And we ask God for help around that. But that's a little bit of an anomaly in terms of the theme that we're just speaking about, in terms of redemption and love and dialogue, etc., to fight against the enemies. However, in the original Haggadah, we didn't have the Shvach HaMazcha. It was in the 12th century when the Jews were undergoing all these pogroms and oppressions in Europe that paragraph entered the Haggadah. And it's understandable because when you have enemies who are oppressing you all the time, you want to make sure you overcome evil. The Jewish position toward evil, as you know, is complex. Amalek is a separate category, but we have the category of evil where we try to transpose an enemy from hating us to loving us. We see that, let's say, with the laws of returning lost animals, or helping an animal, unloading or loading an animal. If we have a friend who has an animal that needs to be loaded, and another friend who has an animal who needs to be unloaded, so we're first to go to the one who needs to be unloaded because the animal is suffering, the donkey or the ox. However, the halacha is if we see a friend who has an animal that needs to be unloaded and an enemy who needs his donkey to be loaded, we first go to the enemy, even though the friend's animal may be suffering a bit. We go to the enemy because with the great opportunity of transforming that enemy into a friend by doing a kind act to the person, helping him load his animal, that might touch him and have him see you in a new way and create a whole new relationship of giving and loving instead of enmity. So we have many suggestions that we should enter dialogue with someone who is different from us or who in some way we define as an enemy and transpose that. However, that is different with the sin of Amalek. Amalek, we have to fight the door in every generation. Why is that? There are three major reasons. Amalek was the person, firstly, in the Smichot HaParshia, it's juxtaposed right after the halachot about having honest weights. And right after that, Amalek comes and attacks the Jews. When we live with dishonesty and we trick people, we're vulnerable toward punishment and toward enemies who can attack us. We have to be an honest people. The other two reasons are Amalek. What was the origin of Amalek? If you look at Breshit, the end of Breshit, and when it shows the genealogy of Esav, we see there that the origin of Amalek came from the story of Timnah, who was a non-Jewish person who wanted to convert to Judaism, who came to Yaakov's family. She was turned away, and she went to Esav. And Esav took her and married her off to his daughter, to his son. So, and it says that the offspring of Timnah and Esav's son is Amalek. So the origins of Amalek was a woundedness, a sense of rejection and an anger that later was displaced on Jews and the Jewish people and the offspring of Yaakov. An amazing midrash, but it shows that the roots of people's behaviors need to be discerned in order to get to a deeper understanding and a deeper transformation in the encounter with other people. It's the same, the story of the copper serpents in Bamidbar in the desert, when they sinned and Moshe asked God how to overcome this, and he told him to build a copper serpent and have the people stare at the serpent. The very snake that bit them can heal them. You have to look at the source of the biting and what has bitten you in order to transform it. So Amalek needs to be fought against, that energy of putting others down. The other thing is about Amalek has to do with the Kabbalim speak about the gematria of Amalek. The numerology of Amalek is 240. The numerology of Safek, of doubt, is 240. Samach is 60, Pei is 80, Kuf is 100, 240. So Amalek came into the world to create doubt in the world. You were hot, the Jewish people were hot coming out of Egypt, the miracles and filled with faith. And Amalek arrogantly and stridently attacked the weak and the elderly from behind and said, I don't care about your God, I'm not afraid of your God. And this really attenuated the faith of the Jewish people, created some doubt in them. Does God really protect them, etc.? So the fight against Amalek is really the fight against doubt. It's the expression of faith, and that's what overcomes an Amalek-like nature. So therefore, Shvach HaMascha is against really Amalek, and the history of the Jewish people with anti-Semitism is awful. There are many, many energies that go against the people with that terrible hatred. We have theological anti-Semitism from Christianity. The Jews were blamed for killing Jesus, and therefore they had to suffer, and the only way they could be redeemed is if they took on belief in Jesus. And for generations and generations, there were from the Christian religion, there was much anger toward the Jews, much destruction. Then there's also this pseudoscientific anti-Semitism from Darwinism and Voltaire and the Enlightenment, where the Jews were looked at as lesser than, survival of the fittest, and they were not fit. Or Voltaire said they're a backward people, a primitive people. And during the Middle Ages, they were attacked because they were better than, or they were different, and they didn't have land, so they lent money, and they were wise, and they had positions of good stature. So they were attacked whether they were better than or whether they were worse than. And the Jews themselves had the sense, as I mentioned earlier on, of inflation, deflation. They were separate people. So people don't like difference, and it's the same with all different people. If we dress differently, if we think differently. Islamophobia is the same way. Dressing with a hijab, and we dress in certain ways. We wear suits. We have beards, etc. So we're singled out, anyone that's different and not conforming to the majority. So this anti-Semitism and this Amalek energy has followed us throughout history, and Pesach is a time to heal this in two ways: the Shvach HaMascha, but mainly the love, the transformation, the dialogue, the encounter, moving from a state of Chametz to a state of Matzah, moving from Mitzrayim to Israel, and coming to this messianic consciousness that that a world can be a beautiful world when we're honest, when we listen, when we have faith, and we have honesty, and we love people, and we hope that b'meher yameinu we will bring the Mashiach b'meher yameinu through our elevation of consciousness and through utilizing the Pesach energy of overcoming the Torah with the Pesach and overcoming Lashon Hara, the symptoms of our inner slavery, and may that day come soon. And we say Amen. Shalom. Bye. Chag Sameach.